and welcome to this episode of John's Model Kit Review. In today's fun classic model kit review, we'll be taking a look at the Hobbycraft Lavochkin La-5 in 1/48 scale. This is Hobbycraft kit number HC1589. This kit was originally released in 1991. In this review video, we'll take a look at what comes in the box. We'll talk about the detailing on the exterior of the kit and the fit of the major parts. We'll also talk about the detailing on the interior of the kit, and we'll look at the detail that's found on the smaller parts that comprise the aircraft interior and the landing gear. We'll look at the clear parts that are included with the kit, as well as the decals. We'll also talk about the shape accuracy of the kit. We'll also compare this kit to the much newer Zvezda and Eduard La-5FN. We'll take a look at the history of the La-5, and I'll talk about any modifications that I made to the kit parts during this build. I have just finished a refresh on this kit since it was damaged in a recent display shelf collapse, and I thought this would be a great time to review this classic kit. Just a quick note on the designation of this aircraft. Hobbycraft labels this an La-5. In actuality, it is the La-5FN model. Looking at the history of the La-5, the Lavochkin La-5 fighter was developed from the preceding Lag-3. While the Lag-3 had been powered by a liquid-cooled V12 Klimov M105P, the Lag-5 was powered by a double-row 14-cylinder radial engine called the Shetsov ASH-82. This engine was developed from the Wright R1820 Cyclone, and the first installation of this engine into a Lag-3 airframe was finished in the winter of 1941. The most powerful version of the La-5 was the La-5FN. It was powered by the ASH-82FN with fuel injection and offered 1,560 horsepower. The La-5FN was equal to its German opponents while flying below 3,000 meters and inferior to the Bf-109G and FW-190 at altitudes over 3,000 meters, and that's about 10,000 feet. The armament of the La-5 consisted of two 20mm SH-VAK cannon, each with 200 rounds. Underwing racks could carry two bombs of up to 100 kilograms, and the direct successor for the La-5FN was the La-7 that entered service in September of 1944. Looking at the kit instructions, step 1 has us assembling the cockpit interior. One thing I'll note is that the instructions are not very clear as far as parts placement. Another thing I'll note is that there's not many positive locators for these parts, and so the instructions only provide a loose guide for what goes where. Obviously, this isn't terribly ideal, neither is it terribly accurate. And honestly, this kind of sets the theme for the rest of this kit. In step 2, we are closing up the fuselage halves and we're inserting the cockpit tub into the fuselage halves. I would suggest mounting the fuselage tub into the fuselage halves before the glue on all of the cockpit parts is dried. That way you can kind of tweak the fit as needed. In step 3, we're assembling the prop and the front of the engine cowling. I didn't have any difficulty here, but I did modify the prop spinner. That's part 19. I drilled out the end of that, and then I mounted a cannon barrel sticking through the end of that. That was on the actual aircraft. In step 4, we are building the wing assembly, and then we're attaching that to the fuselage assembly. We're also adding the air scoop to the top of the engine, as well as the clear parts and the tail planes. I found the fit of the lower wing to the fuselage to be pretty good. However, the fit of the upper wings to the fuselage at the wing roots really leaves something to be desired. The tail planes and the rudder went on without issue. I'll also note that the air scoop on top of the engine does not fit well at all, and you really need to modify these parts to get them to sit down nicely. In step 5, we're building the landing gear for this aircraft. I didn't have any issues with this step of construction. In step 6, we're attaching the landing gear to the aircraft. We're also attaching the under-engine oil cooler as well as the tail wheel. Once again, we run into very vague instructions and several parts that don't have positive locators, and so what you end up doing is just making your best guess on these parts. I modified the oil cooler housing, and that's part 44. I thinned down the front and rear trailing edges of this part. I also inserted an oil cooler since the kit has no oil cooler, and when you looked at the kit head on, you could see straight through this part, which is incorrect. That brings us to the painting and marking guides for this aircraft. There are 3 decal options included in this kit. 2 of them are in the two-tone gray over Russian underside blue. The third one is in a dark green over Russian underside blue. I chose to model an La-5FN in winter camouflage. I used a mix of the kit supplied decals and decals left over from an La-7 build. Looking at the surface detailing on the exterior of the kit, it's represented by finely engraved panel lines and some engraved rivet detail. This actually doesn't look bad once it's weathered. And my biggest gripe here is the very overdone fabric detail on the rudder and on the elevators and on the ailerons. In conclusion, well, as happy as I am with the way that this kit turned out, it's really let down by the shape accuracy, by the vague instructions, by the lack of positive locators for most of the parts, and really poor fit and detail on some of the parts. If you're looking for the most accurate La-5FN kit currently available, I would highly suggest looking at the Eduard boxing of the Zvezda La-5FN. That is Eduard part number 1183. That kit is far superior to the Hobbycraft offering in every aspect save ease of construction. And in fact, the Eduard La-5FN is a very parts heavy, very difficult build. As such, I can only recommend it to experienced modelers. I built this Hobbycraft La-5 when I was first getting back into model building. I originally built it in a clean configuration with no weathering. I subsequently went back and used it as a test bed for weathering. And in my most recent rebuild of this kit, I have further weathered it. And I'm actually really surprised at how nicely it came out. Well, I'd love to know what you guys think. If there are any Hobbycraft La-5 fans out there, please let me know in the comment section below. As always, I hope you found this video entertaining and informative. And until next time, model on.